Hi, everyone. Welcome once again to Mentoring Developers. This is a podcast and YouTube show for you if you are a new developer, if you want to be a developer, you have questions, and you're not sure if you're cut out for this, you come to the right place. And here we interview people who are starting out or who struggled, or sometimes they're helping people who struggle. Also, we have discussions on certain topics, right, that you may not hear in other places, and we keep it simple here. If a jargon, a term is thrown around, we want to take a break, take a timeout, and explain what it is, right? We want to be inclusive. And today, my guest is Oscar Delgadillo. Oscar Delgadillo is a developer, but he has a very interesting story. So let me read what happened to him. So he went to a high school robotics team to help out, probably do some coding, and he didn't know a lot of the languages and the features, and ended up helping people, and maybe that launched his career and his future podcasting career. So let's welcome Oscar. How are you, Oscar?
Oh, muy bien. Very good. Thank you.
Very nice to have you. So tell us a little bit about this story.
Yes, actually, I had just graduated from a programming bootcamp, and I was looking to volunteer, trying to look for opportunities, to give back. I think the first mistake in that was trying to do it almost immediately. I should have probably established myself somehow, because as I reached out, folks were like, "Oh yeah, we have this." I think at the time it was proposed to me as a STEM club. And I was like, okay, that sounds like something that fits. So I signed up here in Chicago. You have to go through this process if you want to volunteer into high school. So I went through the whole process, showed up. Turns out that they were working on robotics, which I was not prepared for. So of course, I'm not one to back down. So I went ahead and tried to help as best I could. And I ended up basically picking up Java and learning how to build robots.
That's fantastic. So I'm trying my fancy new video system, but you can't see Oscar, but the viewers will be able to see. I'm trying to switch between the two scenes, and it's funny because I have to reach and do that. I don't have a fancy remote control for that, and so it's fun, but I think it'll come out better, hopefully. So that's great. And you graduated from a boot camp. A lot of people will be like, "What's a boot camp?" Because they may think of something else. They may think a military boot camp. Well, we're talking about a way for somebody who has no computer science knowledge, right? You may not actually have any computer science degree, but you feel like you should be working in technology. So what you could do instead of say, I have to go to college, you could just go to an academy, a boot camp for a few months, 3-4 months, and just work until you know just enough to get your foot in the door. Isn't that what it is?
Correct. Yeah.
So how long ago was that?
So this was back so I got accepted to the boot camp 2015. It was called Dev Bootcamp. It is now actually out of business, but it was one of the more popular ones at that time. And this was around 2015. I deferred my entry until I think it was actually the beginning of 2016, so January 2016, and I graduated from it May of 2016.
Okay, so that was pretty recent, about 4 years ago, roughly. Correct. And before that, you didn't have any experience in programming, am I right?
Yes, that's right. And completely no experience. I know some folks kind of talk about, I growing up, I did a little bit of programming. I just didn't know it was programming. I think the closest thing was probably MySpace CSS editing back in the day, but I can't recall that I've actually even did anything remotely close to programming.
Okay. So what got you interested? Like people don't just wake up one day and say they want to be they want to be a developer. That's an investment in time, money, and you have to sacrifice a lot to be able to drop whatever you were doing before. What was your motivation?
Well, I think like many people, it was my need to solve a problem. I was working and still am actually working in the supply chain management field, basically logistics, trucking, freight management, that kind of those kind of things. I was working in a family business, and we had very manual processes around invoicing. It was just all very labor intensive, a lot of repetitive work. And so basically I was trying to find ways to speed up that process. And through, research and reaching out in social media, social networking sites, my friends kind of were like, oh, you should check these things out. And so that kind of led me into programming.
And how did you find it? Was it hard?
To program, or?
Yeah, I mean, you just started something that's intimidating for millions of people. And you just got into it. And what was your first week like?
Oh, yeah. So before I did go into the bootcamp knowing a little programming, because like I said, I had deferred my entry. And so prior to that, I had actually picked up Python as scripting. And I found that actually relatively easy in terms of understanding that I was just trying to code or program line by line instructions that I wanted the computer to do. So it was very rudimentary, very, very basic. And fortunately, I found that easy. The bootcamp itself, the first months, it was definitely very, very difficult trying to change my mentality from, again, sort of like not just a procedural, programming or the way that we think things, but, just trying to change it into algorithmic thinking and, all sort of different ways to solve problems.
Okay. And after you graduated a few weeks later, maybe 2 or 3, 4 months later, at some point, clearly you've been bombarded with all kinds of information. And you probably have a few projects under your belt, right? You know what GitHub is at that time. After that, right? You
Correct.
Probably know how to use an editor, a text editor, or maybe an integrated development environment or an IDE to create a program, compile it, run it, even make a website, and, have people fill in some data on a website and save it and retrieve it, all that kind of stuff, some basic things. And I'm sure you probably, learned from others, and I can imagine how hectic it would be. But then the day after, you're done, but really you don't have any experience to put on your resume. How did you build a resume?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's a very good question. It was also sort of, I don't know if you would call it unfortunate, but I spent the following 3 years still working with family. And like you said, it was just project after project. Nothing really shot up because, there was just differences in viewpoints and in opinions. And my things never really got implemented. So after 3 years, I left that company to look for my first position as a software engineer, like an official software engineer. And yeah, it was definitely tough. I only had a bunch of, started projects, and I think it was just the constant, display of my work. I just had to keep working for. There were friends obviously who had reached out, and I worked on projects for them. And whether I completed it or not, I still kind of showcased them, and it just kept doing that until finally, again, I think it was a little bit of a good fortune that there was a startup in logistics, which my background was in just from experience. And I was able to just tack on that software engineer experience on top of that. And no matter how minor it was, I think that really made the difference.
Oh, this is lovely to hear. You know why I say that is because you had some real world valuable experience in something other than software. In your case, logistics. For some other people, it's journalism, or it could be as a teacher, or literally anything. You could be a person cooking burgers. Whatever it is that you have done and you're good at before you get into software, now you bring all of that experience into it. Now you have actually an advantage over people who are, those may be the people that, like me, all we did was programming. So if I say, I want to build software, I have to actually know what I'm doing, because it's not most problems in the world are not technology problems, right? Most problems are business problems, life problems. And if I don't understand, if I have not internalized those problems, I will probably produce a solution that as insufficient or useless. And that's how, where, you'll see a lot of Silicon Valley companies, they never go anywhere because they don't know what they're doing. So the first phase now we've learned through experience that if you want to build a new company, you want to make sure that you are solving a problem first, right? A real problem. But in your case, you already know logistics. So it's a huge advantage. Now, if you one day decided to build a product that serves the logistics industry, you could do that, right?
Right.
And that's a huge advantage. So that's good. Now, it's good to get into it and get a first project. And usually the first job that you get, it may not pay as well. It may not be the right mix of technologies, but you just want to be acknowledged as a software developer at some level. Because what happens is you just went through a boot camp. And I can tell you a little secret that there are a lot of people who don't really like boot camps. And they think that, these are producing these pretend software developers. And a lot of people in the industry who have been around, they feel like, no, that's wrong. However, I disagree with that. But to break that now, if you are already working, even if it's not exactly what you wanted to do, now it gives you a reason or a good story to tell when you want to get your second job. So the first thing that you did in the logistics, how long did that last?
What do you mean? Like the working in logistics in general?
When you were doing your project, your first project that was related to logistics, how long was that?
So that was, like I said, straight after the boot camp, which was 2016. It was another 3 years that I stayed at the family business trying to come up with solutions. And actually, one of the things that I learned through that experience was, because you're right in that at first, coming out of straight from the boot camp, I was like, okay, they taught me, if we want to get technical, they taught me Ruby and JavaScript. So I was able to work in the frameworks and libraries such as Ruby on Rails and React. That was kind of what I became pretty good at. And so I came back thinking, I'm going to solve all these problems. And then I realized, okay, how do I put into motion these things that I've learned? My knowledge of databases, my knowledge of backend and front end. How do I create solutions? And very quickly, I learned that sometimes those aren't the solutions that are needed immediately. It's very hard to create an app. As many developers and engineers know, it's very, very difficult, especially when you're on your own. It's going to be tough work. It is possible, but it's probably going to take years. And given that, again, the problem was inefficiencies, business inefficiencies, businesses can't afford years of production and development. So I quickly switched thanks to a friend who had actually also hired me as a TA part-time for a program at DePaul here in Chicago. And it was sort of a coding, again, sort of like a starter coding program, but it was focused around first and foremost creating solutions more than it was about implementing a specific language or a specific tech solution. And so that really actually taught me, once I kind of fulfilled that part-time gig for a couple months, I was still working with family, so I just kind of brought that back and was like, okay, instead of trying to create a full-blown app, let me see what sort of solutions I can create with the already existing technologies. And so I think that was a huge kind of wake-up call, and also, again, learning different ways of being a software engineer.
I think this is a learning process for all of us. So when I started, it was hard for me because I was, as I said, I wasn't in a particular domain and I wasn't really wedded to a particular type of software. So when you're this general purpose, generic software engineer, which I was, I had no direction. But if I knew, or if I had an interest in a type of software or a type of programming, then I would have, it's kind of a double-edged sword. And I would have the opportunity to become really, really good at one thing because I'd be hyper-focused on one. However, if for whatever reason it didn't work out, then it would be hard to, get out and do other things. So it could be difficult, but I think this could be a perfect start for somebody, especially if they're coming out of an industry, whatever industry you're in. Go back to that industry once you've learned programming and now solve their problems because you know it. So you worked in that company for the family business for 3 years or so, but then you left, right?
Correct.
What made you leave?
Well, it was again being almost like the sole developer, and even though it was a family business, and I kind of had I had administrative work to do as well. I was doing payroll and all the other things. I think I found it very difficult to not only juggle those things, but also, again, if there's not much support for the solutions that I was creating, one example was that I found that we needed help with communication between our dispatchers and our drivers. And so again, kind of letting go of an app solution, I thought, okay, let me look at communication software, free communication software. Always try to go free first. And we started using something called Slack. It's a pretty popular communicating tool in the industry. And I applied it to our little trucking logistics company, and I implemented a way of for drivers to be able to text a number that then converted the message into a Slack message. And so it kind of became like a universal, like a unified communicating solution for everyone. Dispatchers can communicate through Slack. It would send a text message back and forth. And so drivers didn't have to learn anything new. They didn't have to download anything new. But again, the adoption of this solution was very, very difficult, even though I obviously offered training and I was like, okay, if we're serious about these solutions, let's go ahead and do them. And there wasn't much support. So after there was just, constant problems with this, I just found like it wasn't going to be good for me and my growth. It wasn't going to be, good for my, no aspect of my growth, personal career, technological growth. It was just, so kind of saw a block there. And so I figured I needed to move on.
No, that's a great way of coming to that conclusion, because people switch jobs for various reasons. But if you find yourself in a situation where you know that 1 year after another, there's not a huge improvement in your skills or your future prospects, then it's time to leave. And it's perfectly okay, even if it's a family business or even if it's a job or colleagues that you like. And in our industry, 2 to 3 years is considered a good amount of time to spend in a company, and you could stay or you could leave after that. So that's great. And then every time you switch jobs, you have this opportunity to really upgrade your career. You may be able to get more money. You may be able to get a better title. You may be able to work in technologies that you didn't get a chance to before. And I mean, in general, that's a good thing, right? So a lot of people in other industries, they're looking for stability. They want a job that is perfect, and that's it, right?
Right.
But in tech, that doesn't work.
Right. And I was just going to say that it's exactly that. Also, you kind of seek out those opportunities. And at first, when I was seeking for a job, and it's the shock really hit after I quit with no prospective opportunities or any any positions. So I was like, oh shoot, I'm potentially going to struggle. I struggled financially for 6 months trying to look for a job. And so you kind of get a little bit desperate and you start looking everywhere. And it wasn't even with that. Again, I almost forgot that I had this experience in logistics just because I was scrambling to do all these things. I was trying to find jobs to, again, pay my bills while I was seeking, I was looking for this tech job. And I almost forgot my experience. And it wasn't until, again, fortunately, a friend of a friend was the one who was hiring for the position at this logistics software company. And once that came to, once that was, she let me know about this, it brought me back, and I was like, oh my God, I do have experience. Let me prep for this. And that's when I did the work of like, okay, how do I gather this and gather myself? And I did interviews for them. And it was immediately, I sensed like I was at home almost, right? Where you're just kind of like, oh, this is my territory. I know exactly what I'm talking about. So I was able to get them pretty hype about my experience because of that.
Okay. So now you got another job? Was that a contract or was it full-time employment?
No, it was full-time employment. I'm still in AM. It's like a year and a half in almost. So
okay, you're still there.
Well.
And so, what's keeping you there? Let's talk about that.
It is the owners. They're great, empathetic people. They've actually known for creating software and software companies in logistics. So, I trust their experience. And not only that, but they've built also a culture here in at the company that is very inclusive and again aligns with my values. So I think that it's also very fortunate. I feel like people also maybe don't get this in a lot of places, but it's great when your vision for where you want to take technology in your field, such as logistics, also aligned. And there's that. And then there's also the values of, how you feel, your work ethic should be.
Yeah, this was great. If you have that alignment, there's nothing better than that. So what I'm wondering is during your journey, you're on your own in a boot camp, then you were struggling perhaps for a short time, then you worked in a family business, then after that you're struggling for a longer time, then you started working here. During this time, did you have anybody reach out to you? Did you have a mentor? Was there somebody you could go to that could help you?
Yes, and actually, like I had mentioned, the person who suggested me for the job, her name's Kara Corral. She's, again, actually really well known in a couple of organizations that focused on helping underrepresented communities, be highlighted for this reason. We need more representation. And so she's also a fellow boot camper. So she was the one that I spoke to before I joined the boot camp to get her opinions on it. And, we stayed friends even afterwards, and we've stayed friends for these past couple of years. And so she was really I kind of saw her not only as a mentor, but as advocate and a sponsor as well. I think sometimes if we want to discuss the difference, between mentorship and advocacy is, she definitely guided me in what I should do, what are the things I should focus on. But as an advocate, she reached out for me for various positions, and she sent out emails and did all that stuff for me, which is amazing. I owe her that.
It is amazing to have someone who has your back, really.
Right.
It's important. And we can all play that role. And you can do that for people who are just coming up, people who are listening to this podcast. It could be somebody who is maybe struggling to find their first job, and they could get inspiration from you, or you could actually guide them, right? If they ever met you in real life or online and they ask you a question, they may not have the answer. So it's good to have people like that that random strangers could come up to. Or if you're working in a company, and if anybody who's just hired right off of college or as their first job, they feel like they could go up to anybody and ask. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Mm-hmm.
So I like that idea. Now, what I find is that in our industry in general, we don't do mentorship. Not really. Some places we do that. There are some places who have apprenticeships. In some places they have official mentorship programs. But traditionally we are an industry where we don't like to pamper people. We expect a certain number of people to fail. And so we say, if I hire 10 people, 6 are going to be good for me, 4 are going to be bad for me. So after a year, I'm going to get rid of the 4 and we keep the 6. That's good, but what about the 4 that were, removed? So those people also have similar, maybe even more ability than the ones that were kept. And that's where mentorship comes in. So I think I'm really glad that you're able to get in there and got your break, and you had an advocate, you had a mentor, you had somebody who was fighting for you. Obviously, unfortunately, we don't have enough of these people that are fighting for other people. So I think we could really improve our community if we were to offer that. So this is why this podcast exists, because we want to foster this idea of mentorship, this idea that, we're not perfect. Just because someone gets ahead in their career or they're doing really well, sometimes it's a function of where they came from or the background they have, or maybe a lot of other things that are not related directly to their work. And I've seen that happen where with slight encouragement and mentorship, you find people succeed. So empathy, I think that's the key. And you're talking about that too. So what do you do in your day-to-day life these days, in your office life?
Yeah, in my cooped up bedroom life, you mean?
Yeah. So because of the pandemic right now, everybody is working from home, and a lot of people are struggling. I know, because they're not set up to work remotely, and a lot of people have to work in their kitchen, which is a challenge.
Yeah, actually, the kitchen's actually sometimes a good change of environment, which is something that I've learned. I definitely struggled. If I can be honest, I struggled with working from home for the first couple of months. But now that I've kind of adjusted a little bit, and I still have my bad days, right? But I think for the most part, given that I've created, really my husband helped create. I need to give him, give props where props are due. So he helped me create my little workspace that I have here now, and I've picked up a couple. I think generally I've always been good at picking up hobbies, so I think that really has helped. And so I picked up I became a lover of fountain pens, and so I started collecting them and started collecting a bunch of stationery, which it led me to some wild wild purchases, but that has kept me busy. I try to write with the pens, try to use up obviously my materials, and instead of going digital like all the way, because I need that relief sometimes.
Yeah. Having something to hold, something tactical, that's just really good. Personally, I've been working remotely. I just touched my microphone stand. It made a weird sound. But personally, I've been working remotely for so many years. I'm very comfortable doing that. If you set up your environment where you have everything you need, and then what I like about my home office is that it's an office. When I go work at a client, I'm in a hallway usually, and I don't have anything there. I just have my laptop. I'm lucky if I have a screen, right, to plug into. But we need more than that. Sometimes for creative work, I feel it's good to have some privacy. But I can see your point of view as well, where you need maybe collaboration. When you're starting out, you may have a lot of questions, and you may feel like, I can't just walk over to somebody and ask a question or casually learn from somebody through osmosis. Now I have to interrupt them using Slack or Teams or something, and I have to say, can I bother you for 5 minutes? I can completely see that point of view as well. But I do find that working remotely has makes me much more productive and happy, frankly, because then I don't have to do anything other than except for what I want to do, and I can do other things in my day. And being a person with a family, little kids, I appreciate the ability to work from home.
Right. Yeah, I actually have a dog, and my in-laws have a dog that we also help take care of, and so we have to walk them. We have to walk them at different periods of the day. So occasionally I'll use that as a break as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so and the thing that I learned when we were chatting before we started recording was that you are about to start your own podcast. So I'd love to know about that so our listeners could go and check it out. I know that it's not live yet, but it will probably be live or close to getting live by the time this goes live. So tell us.
Yeah, sure. I was fortunate again. I seem to fall upon some good fortune sometimes, which is great. I was fortunate enough I reached out to an already established podcaster, Adriana from LatinXAmerica, and she has a couple seasons already live, and I had reached out for her for some tips because I had this idea that a coworker, now converted into friend. She and I, we thought about potentially releasing a podcast that could to help folks and to relate our stories and talk about different topics that we feel are important. And so I reached out to Adriana, and she was actually very, very happy for me to have reached out. And she was the one who offered to kind of host us under her platform. So if you look up at LatinXAmerica, I'm assuming that's where that information will be available. And because we're still working, again, it's very preliminary stuff still. We're doing some pre-recordings. We still have yet to create some of our promotional material. So we're still very, very early on. But it's actually going to be called Casual Fridays on LatinXAmerica, or Casual Viernes. We don't know yet. We try to add we want to add that that Latinx spin to it.
Okay, no, that's good. So if you are a Latinx, or if you're interested in what's happening in that community, you could check it out. And something I know that it's probably not all tech related, some tech and just whatever is happening. So I'm sure that people love to check it out. The links will be on the page for this podcast. I'm going to turn it on now so everybody can see it. It's going to be mentoringdevelopers.com/episode 85. Show notes, links. We're going to have the links for Oscar's podcast and anything else that he wants to share. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, it will be in the description, so you can check it out as well. And, great to see somebody, coming out of a boot camp and doing really well. And looks like, the future is bright. And I can imagine, 5 years from now, you coming on the show and, you're this big shot. I'd have to work hard to get you on the show, but that would be a good outcome.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll probably be super busy.
Yeah. Do you feel like you want to be in technology or just making things, or do you feel like you like to go into management?
I think I would probably want to remain in just, engineering for a while, just because I love coming up with solutions to problems. And yeah, I think management seems attractive in its own right, but I think for the most part right now, I think creating solutions is my go-to. That's
great. And a lot of our listeners, and a lot of people, most people that I know are in that same camp. I do a little bit of both, and so it's interesting. It's very satisfying to build solutions, but it's also it's very satisfying to be able to actually have an impact.
Right.
And not just do what you're told. So a little bit of both, I think, is a great mix. And you could do that if in the future you decide to start a company and make your own logistic solution, for instance, or something else. Then you would be able to do a little bit of both. But that's a discussion for the future when you have that experience and you feel like you want to. We'll see in 5 years where you go.
Right. And also a little tidbit. If you do want to flex those leadership muscles, you can always reach out to communities. I actually, help organize a community here in Chicago that started out as a Meetup, People of Color Code. And when I realized, I might eventually, I'll probably have to switch to a more leadership role, but I don't, I guess I don't feel comfortable with it yet. This was a good way to experiment sort of that.
Mm-hmm. That sounds great. So all the links and everything here on your screen, mentoringdevelopers.com/episode 85. It was great to have you. And if you're listening right now and you want to send us a message, you want to send Oscar a message, you want to send me a message, ask me something, then you can email me at us@mentoringdevelopers.com. That's also on the screen. So that was Oscar Delgadillo, and I'm so happy to have you here. Any last words before we go?
I just want to thank you for having me here. I really love the idea of your podcast. I've seen a couple of the episodes, and I appreciate that podcasts like these, content like this exists for starting developers. I think it's a great thing.
It's really great to hear. Okay. Well, see you soon, hopefully.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.